Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is the podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I want to wish you a Happy New Year. I haven't gotten to say that to you yet, even though we are now over a week into the new year. I have had the cold from you-know-where for the last 10 days or so. Yeah, I got it a couple days before New Year's Eve, or the day before New Year's Eve, I guess. So about 10 days, and you can probably still hear it in my voice. You can definitely hear it in my voice in the interview that's coming up, for which I am very, very sorry that you have to listen to my cold voice. But enough of that. Happy New Year. I hope that 2019 is treating you well so far, now that we are over a week into it already. As I just said, I do have an interview for you for this episode. And this week I am interviewing Chaithanya Sohan about her book that she co-authored with Shaima Adin. It's called America Deconstructed. And it's a really fascinating look of 16 different short stories told from the perspective of 16 immigrants and their experience in coming to America and facing different cultural challenges, different language barriers, all kinds of things that they encountered in their journey from their former home to their new home, and how that came about, what they had for expectations before leaving, how those expectations were met or not met. The description on the back of the book is as follows. Nasir was 9 years old when he escaped Taliban and fled Afghanistan. His story, There Are Some People Who Are Coming to Take Me Away, chronicles the resilience of a 9-year-old boy as he traveled from Afghanistan to America in his quest for the American dream. I Saw a Ripe Mango I'd Like to Pluck showcases the love story of Chidibera and Ifenyinwa and their struggles with language, culture, and being African in America. In the story Kosovo, really cool, Yeaton takes us through his journey to America and often being asked his identity in spite of being white. In the story I Am Exotic Mocha P. Diddy, Prague describes his journey from a young sixth grader who hid his attraction to boys in conservative India to embracing his sexuality in America. America Deconstructed follows the journeys of 16 immigrants as they maneuver cultural differences, accents, and uncomfortable situations while feeling a sense of belonging in America. So there you go. That is the description of America Deconstructed. Again, it is co-authored by Chaithanya Sohan, who I'm interviewing today, and Shaima Adin. Both of them have stories in this. They are both also immigrants. I found this book fascinating and really interesting to read. The 16 stories have a lot of similarities from something as not simple, but from something like Americans talk too fast. So many of the stories talked about how the person telling them felt that they had really good or pretty good English coming to America, and then they got here and they so often had to ask people to repeat themselves because Americans talk too fast and we have a lot of slang. Just as if I were to go to another country, there are certain phrases that just aren't going to translate well, no matter how well I think that I might speak the language. So I've always been fascinated and really impressed by people who move to another country and have to not only adapt to another culture, but also adapt to another language. Even one story, the woman is from England, and England, they speak English, right? Well, yes, but British English and American English, very different. There's a lot of things that don't sound the same. So she moved from, I think, Cornwall to Ohio and had a very big culture shock in that transition. There's a lot of things that made me laugh in the stories. They're told with some really great humor. There were a lot of things that made me very sad in the stories because of the experiences that the people telling them were facing and had to overcome, or had to leave the reasons they had to leave their homes to immigrate. There were some things that made me profoundly sad also in terms of how they were treated once they got here, and just some of the experiences they had, whether that was with racism or experience of people not trusting them because they were different, not taking the time to try to get to know them because they were different, being annoyed because they didn't understand what they were saying, etc. So there's a lot of different layers going on in this book, and I really enjoyed it. If this is an area that you are interested in or you want to learn more, I definitely recommend this book for some reading. It's a topic that is in the news a lot right now, immigration, and this isn't political. Whatever side of that conversation that you are on, I think you would find things in this book that you would find interesting, challenging, fascinating, educational, etc. So I'm going to stop talking about the book for now and let Chaithanya speak more about it. She goes by Chai for short, and she will tell you why in the interview. Even though I'd already read her story, the story still makes me gasp. So just, poor thing, I would have shortened my name also. But it, again, makes me sad that she had to shorten it for the reason she had to shorten it. There's a little teaser for you. With that, let's go ahead and turn our attention to my interview with author Chai Sohan.
Hi, Chai. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here, and we are here to talk about your book, America Deconstructed. Before we get to the book, though, I would love for my listeners to get to know you a little. If you could just share a bit about yourself, that would be great.
Absolutely. My name is Chaithanya Sohan, but I go by Chai because it's a pretty hard name to pronounce. I'm an engineer by profession, so I've been an engineer for about 10 years, and I've been writing for a long time as well. I've been freelancing as a writer for a long time, and in 2018, we decided to write this book and become professional authors, if that's a word. I live in the Bay Area. I go to work every day, and that's sort of the grind right now. Besides that, just the usual.
Okay, thank you. So tell us a bit about the book, America Deconstructed.
America Deconstructed is a short story collection about 16 immigrants who came to America from different places around the world. And the stories follow their journey. The way we did it was we interviewed these 16 people, two of those being me and my co-author, Shaima. And we asked them a series of questions. And the way we went about it was we started with, where are you from? And we let them guide us where they wanted to take the story. Some people told us about their life before they came to America and how they came here and the circumstances that brought them to America. And some people just talked about their life in America, the struggles with cultural differences, language barriers, everyday struggles with simple things like going to Starbucks and ordering coffee or turning on a washer and dryer, which apparently is very different in Europe versus the US, and struggles like that. And so we took these interviews and we converted these interviews into stories. These stories are inspired by the journeys of these people in order to make the stories actual stories and make them interesting. We've added, of course, an introduction based on what they said. And, we added a little bit of fluff around it just to make it interesting and give it a story format. But they're inspired by true stories of these people that came to America.
Okay. And how did you and Shaima decide to write this collection?
Shaima's from Afghanistan, and she's lived in Pakistan for most of her life, and then she immigrated here. I've lived in India all my life before I came here in 2001. And so we met in college. We're both engineers, We met in our undergrad. We became best of friends. And the way our friendship evolved was because of how we would share our everyday struggles being immigrants in America. Like, for instance, I remember her telling me, oh, I went to Starbucks and they asked me, what's your name? And she was like, I said Sally. And they looked at me like, you don't look a Sally. But she was like, I am a Sally. Or, we did a project together and, we were about to be done with our project. And we were leaving for the day. And my professor stood up all the way at the end of the hallway and screamed, shit, Tanya. And I was like, did he just really say that? But he said that because he repeated it like 3 times. And that was actually when I said, you know what, I'm going to say my name is Chai from now on, just so I don't get called that.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was instances like this, or, whether it was, I was a tomboy in India. I played basketball. I wanted to be the next Michael Jordan. That was my dream. So when I came to America, I wore big jeans, bigger than me sweatshirts. I had the shortest of hair. And I walked into San Jose State University, and I could not believe how much of a misfit I was. Because, the girls were, they totally didn't have short hair and didn't wear baggy jeans. And so it took me about 2 years to, for my fashion to evolve into being Americanized in some way while retaining the tomboy in me. And so throughout this process, I would complain to her about how my jeans were uncomfortable or, just everyday teenage struggles that today seem so frivolous.
Mm-hmm.
So the book came from those instances. And years later, we talk every day. And she's my best friend. And, in 2013, I've been freelancing for a long time. And I was tired of kind of juggling my technical side and my creative side. It became a struggle if I wanted to actually earn money as a writer. And so I asked her, hey, do you want to write a book with me? And that's where America Deconstructed happened. And I wrote my story as the first story of the book just to see if I could even write the story. And then we went from there. And so she's done a lot of the editing for the book and the interviews for the book. And I've tried to convert a lot of the story interviews into stories. And that's how we partnered together.
I am going to jump in here now so that we can take our first break of the podcast. When we come back from break, we'll be talking more about the process of co-authoring and how that worked, how they worked together, collaborated, etc. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast, dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with author Chaithanya Sohan about her book, America Deconstructed. She was speaking before the break of the writing process, and now we're going to get into the process of co-authoring this book. So let's get back to that interview.
How did you kind of figure out the process for co-authoring? I'm always intrigued by how people write together.
So I can't say I was very confident in my writing skills, but I knew I could write. So when I did approach her for the book, I approached her because she was my best friend, and it was like a security blanket, and she was my security blanket through the process. With her, I mean, she writes, but that's not mostly what she does. And so the way we decided was she was going to do a lot of the interviews because she knew a lot of people. Being a refugee, being from Afghanistan, she knew a lot of people with really strong stories and really strong journeys. And, so she brought that to the book. She converted the interviews into an actual interview on paper. And in some instances, like her story, she wrote the uh, initial story, and then I made that into a stronger story. And so most of the writing, I sort of took charge with her helping me along the way, but most of the editing, she did it. So I would send her iterations of the story, and she would edit it and, tell me, no, this doesn't look good or that doesn't look good. And so that was our partnership. So she took care of all the social media and, the editing, and the later, after the writing was done, she took care of everything else for the book.
Okay. And so it sounds like Shaima knew several of the people that are included in the book. There's 16 stories. How did you have more than that? Did you have to narrow it down? How did you select the stories?
That was a struggle too. I knew a lot of Indians, and I mean, we could, romanticize their journeys and say they've had these hard lives. And most of the Indians, they come here, they're tech workers, their struggles are visa or, immigration related, just, staying in the country sort of thing. But I mean, we don't have really hard journeys. We're coming from India, we're educated, we come here with jobs, so so their stories aren't as exciting as, refugee, coming from a war zone. And so those are the stories that Shaima brought to the book. She knew a lot of the Afghan, Middle Eastern stories that are in the book are from the people that she knew, people she worked with. One person was her husband, and her story itself. And most of the Indian side of things came from me. And then we needed a good mix. And so we went about looking at expats. So a lot of the expats have blogs. And so we, like a British lady that's in my book, we just approached her based on her blog, and she was gracious and she said she'd be part of the book, and that's where we got her. We paid one person to interview for us because he came from Kosovo, and we're like, we need to have you in the book. And so we're like, let me pay you some money, dude. Come on, interview with us. And Shaima knew some of the, the Latino people at her work, and I knew a lot of the Filipino and Asian people at my work. And that's sort of how we brought the book together. We didn't do we didn't have more people than what's in the book. Even getting the 16 people was really hard because people are very, it's their story, and, it's a part of them, and they don't want to share it in a lot of times. And so, the struggle was finding people that were open to sharing their stories with us. And so that's how we got the people.
Okay. You said it can be difficult to share your story, which made me think, how did you decide, in terms of your story in the collection, how did you decide what aspects of your journey to write about?
I'm also very guarded, and I'm an extremely private person. And through this process, I've learned that I have to, if I want to be an author, I have to let go of some of the craziness that's inside of me. I don't put my pictures up on social media because I'm like, I don't want people to know what I look like. So I'm extremely guarded. With my story, I try to focus on my journey coming to America and being in America. That's sort of what I focused on, because my journey coming from India to America wasn't hard. My stepdad was transferred from India to here. He's an engineer, and next thing you know, we're here 6 months later. So there was no struggle. So I focused on my struggle here, being a tomboy, and I was the hardcore tomboy. I played sports. I challenged boys. I beat up boys growing up, and so that was the kind of girl I was. And coming to America, I've been through, a little struggle. Just, I came from an all-girls school where I was a tomboy, and I came to a college which is a co-ed with boys, and I had to give speeches, and I think that's when I had this identity crisis where I'm like, all right, I got to be more girly, but that's not me. So where do I draw the line in the middle where I can be true to myself while being acceptable in America? And the fashion, and I spoke English with a British accent, but coming to America, having to talk in front of people the very first time in college was hard. Even though I'd hosted shows back in my school in India, I was like, I don't know if these people can understand me. And I was vibrating, standing up there talking, to the point where my professor brought a podium in just so he's like, hey, just relax and, hold on to this and talk. And so just struggles where, your confidence is a little, shaken up because you're in a new country, the gender crisis. So yeah, that's what I try to focus on, my journey in this country. And I'm married to an African American man, and which to this day we have our cultural differences, and my husband still laughs at a lot of my British words. The other day I said more with a very British accent, and he's like, oh, look at that British girl in this house, So we have our struggles with that. So yeah, so I try to focus on that part because I thought, it's a little rare mix to see a African American and Indian, and so, and he lives in my house with my Indian parents, and so I thought that would be funny to add to the book and see how people take it.
Yeah, and a lot of the stories actually include some of the communication difficulties, and there's one story where she keeps saying that she doesn't understand American accents, and I think for a lot of people who live here, they're going to say, what do you mean American accents? You have the accent, but if you're coming here, and you already speak English, there's going to be a communication difficulty when people pronounce things differently than you're used to hearing, and a lot of people we're talking about how Americans talk really fast, so it's hard to understand them a lot of times. And I found that really interesting to read because
it's very true. I remember when I was in India and I was trying to come to the U.S., I had to take this exam, which is it's called TOEFL. I think it's teaching English. So it's for English speakers, who speak English as a second language. So I can't remember the exact, what the abbreviation is, but that's what it means is, for English speakers who use English as a second language, they teach you English to go to America. I spoke good English, and I still remember I was sitting in my center that I was going to take this test, and I had my headphones on, and I was trying to say photography, because we say photography, and I was sitting there with my headphones, and I still remember I was like, photography. And, so these things are so real, and you come here and, you're like, oh, or jewelry, we say jewelry in India, and it's like jewelry. These things take time, for your tongue to twist that way. Yeah.
Right. British English is actually quite different from American English when you really start comparing it and you hear the different ways that we pronounce it. It's really fascinating.
Yep. Oh, we have our struggles in my house too, right? And I say, oh no, that's real English. British English is real English, and my husband's like, no, American English is. And so we have our little debates about English.
Right. Well, I'll tell you that I'm also married to an African American man, and we have cultural differences, so you're not alone.
That's awesome.
Yes. So you talked a little bit about the freelance writing that you do. Are there any particular projects that you would like to speak about on the podcast?
I did a lot of freelance projects initially when I came here, and I started off. I'm a feminist. I'm big about women empowerment and feminism, and so when I first came here, I started working for. I was not working really. I was volunteering for this company, which did a lot of social political topics, and I wrote a lot of that, and I've done some buying guides. I don't know if you know what those are, but it's pretty much, so if you're going to go buy a vacuum cleaner at Walmart, apparently you could go on their website and look up buying guides on what you need to look at to buy a vacuum cleaner. So I wrote a lot of those, and that's where I said, the struggles were, I am an engineer. I do a lot of technical writing. I didn't want to do technical writing in my free time at home. And that's where, I decided, I want to write a book. And, the whole concept of writing a book came along was when I started writing buying guides. And I realized that my creativity was just being sucked out of me because I couldn't use any fluff words. It had to be very technical. And so those are some of the projects that I worked on.
It is once again time for us to take another break, so we're going to go ahead and do that. When we come back, Chai will be speaking more about what is next for her in her writing path. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Chaithanya Sohan. Let's go ahead and get right back into that conversation.
And then what's next? Do you want to do another book?
I'm actually in the process of writing my second book, and that's a solo project. I'm doing it by myself. I don't know if it's going to be America Deconstructed Part 2 or I'm going to change the name. I'm still debating, but it's following the same format as the current one. The only difference being this one, I actually found a lot of the people on Instagram and other social media platforms. And these are people that are working in the immigrant refugee space or have stories that are like their journeys are a lot different than just the ones that are in America Deconstructed Part 1. The reason I say that is the Part 1 follows regular journeys, right? It's the assimilation problems, the cultural difference, the language barriers. These are a little more, I think, a little more deeper. People who had different journeys, and by that I mean I interviewed one person who was the top recruit at one point to go into the NBA. And he ended up hurting himself, and his basketball career kind of came to an end. And he decided that he wanted to go back to Nigeria and start the CBL, which is the Continental Basketball League, which kind of emulates what the NBA is doing in the U.S. And that way they're creating jobs in Africa and keeping African talent, which is not the top tier talent that America looks for, in Africa, playing basketball and generating revenue, work for people. And so that's one of the stories. Another one was about a girl who was Syrian American, working with Syrian refugees, and just her calling, where, she went from being this girl who was working in a PR firm doing marketing, and then just getting that call that I got to do something for my people, and, going and working with refugees, and stories like that, which are not necessarily immigrants, but people who are of immigrants, who have immigrant parents, and how they're helping change the world for immigrants and refugees. So that's what I'm working on right now. I want to write a murder mystery at some point. I have this huge idea. I want to continue writing. That's the plan. And at some point, I'm hoping I can do this more on 80% and my engineering on a 20% basis, but it's not there yet. We'll see how the book does and go from there.
So the topics of this book, and actually the book that you're currently working on, are really timely, because this is a conversation that's going on a lot in terms of immigration, et cetera. Do you have any specific hopes for the books themselves in terms of how people will receive them?
When we started writing this book in 2013, it was just as a little fun project. We thought it would be fun for people to see sort of the human side of immigration and see, what people go through when they come here as immigrants. Even me, when I came here, I thought my struggles were over when I walked through the port of entry and they said, "Welcome to the United States of America." I didn't realize that was the easy part. You just get on a plane, get here, you're done. It's everything else that happens that's the struggle. And that's what we wanted to show through this book, is to put a human face to what people go through here. And I thought it'd be a little fun project, because people could see something or read about, experiences that that they don't necessarily know on a first-hand basis. And then the political climate right now kind of changed how the book is being perceived and received. And our hope for this book is just to create tolerance among people, just for people to be more tolerant when they see people who are struggling with language barrier or not knowing how to order something at Starbucks or in a restaurant, to just give them that, that support, or just understand like what they're going through, that everything is new for them and they're just trying to figure things out standing there, and just to be tolerant. I think it's so important to kind of celebrate people's differences and be tolerant of people's differences and embrace it. And I think that's what we need in today's world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So from your perspective, you've come to writing through your own unique path. I mean, everyone does, but do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
I can share the journey that this book took. We started the book in 2013. We were done with the first draft by the end of 2014. We went to a lot of publishers. We went to agents. We went to publishers. We got very positive rejections. I mean, amazingly positive rejections. Thankfully, nobody told me, you can't write, so pack your bag. Go back to being an engineer. Nobody said that, thank God. But the one thing that kept us going was I did not want to accept that this book could not be published traditionally. My stepdad, being an engineer, was like, hey, you don't need a publisher. Just go on Amazon. Just, publish it. Get it out there. I was like, no, I want to do this the way I want to do it. And we stuck our ground. And we used a platform called Publishizer, which is a crowdfunding platform that's a Tinder for authors and publishers. So it hooks authors with publishers. For every milestone that you achieve, you get your book gets exposed to publishers depending on the tier. And our book didn't meet the goals for a traditionally published book, but it just so happened that our publisher happened to look up our book and he was interested, and that's how we got a publishing contract. And so my word of advice to people who want to become authors is never accept defeat. I mean, just keep going and just hold your ground and stick it out, and you'll get somewhere. That's what worked for me. Okay. I was, every time people said no, I was like, no, you don't say no to me. I'm going to continue. It worked.
and if they read your story, they will know that you are definitely stubborn when you decided what you want. So that's admirable. When you take time to read for yourself, do you have favorite authors or genres?
I love reading. I was a girl that, in India that had her, little flashlight under her cover reading a book. My dad, my dad was an avid reader, and my mom hated when my dad had a book in his hand because then he was just gone. Like, she could not reach out to this man. And so I grew up seeing that, and I wanted to be my dad. Like, he was my hero. He still is my hero. And so that's how I started reading. I love Chaminda Ngozi. I can't say her name, so I'm not going to butcher it. But I read Americana, and I mean, it just spoke to me as an immigrant. And I don't know if you know Arundhati Roy. She's an Indian author. I think she wrote The God of Small Things. I loved her book because it was set in the country, in the state in India that I'm from, and I was just like, oh my God. But I'll read anything. I mean, once in a while I go to the phase where I read a really hardcore book, and I'm like, I got to read Nicholas Sparks. Like, that's what I need. So I go through the phases. But I mean, recently I read Becoming, and I was so in love with that book. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's on my list.
So,
you said you want to write a murder mystery. Do you like to read mysteries?
I love crime shows. I love crime shows. I'm one of those people, it's kind of a dichotomy, I think, because I'm an engineer and we're all things practical, but I'm one of those people that loves to listen to stories, and I love to see why someone did something or behaved the way they did, because I could never see myself do something that XYZ did, and I'm so curious to know why they did what they did, So I think that's what the crime shows do for me, is especially Locked Up and, shows like that, sort of reality shows. Those are my Kim Kardashians, by the way. So I'm like, what is this person? Like, what was he? What was going through his head? And so that's, I think, where my murder mystery came from. I was like, I want to write something that's cool. And I loved Gone Girl. I read the book, I watched the movie, and I was just like, my God, how could someone just come up with these twists and turns? And, so I think that's where my murder mystery is coming from.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Where can people find you and Shaima on social media? Do you have a website? Do you have social media links?
We do. I have a website. It's csohan.com. So people can get to know me on there. I've written a little bit about what I like, books, movies, my first crush, movie star, all of it. And we have an Instagram handle. It's at America_Deconstructed. We also have a Twitter. So most of our social media handles are our book. Because it's two of us, it's kind of hard. We have a personal social media as well. But as far as the book goes, the book has its own social media handles. And if you just search for the book, I think you'll find those. But yeah, we're very active on Instagram at America_Deconstructed. And they can get to me through my website.
Okay. And yeah, it looks like on your website you've got links to Facebook and Instagram. So if they go there, they can find you. Okay. Yes. So we've talked about a few things, but is there anything that we haven't talked about in terms of writing or either of your, the current book or the book you're working on that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk more about?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. My second book is still, I've just started writing it. I have about 4 or 5 stories, and I'm trying to get people to interview. So if there are people out there that's listening to your podcast that has really good, that has a journey that they want to share, they could always email me, and I would be more than happy to talk to them. That's just something, if they're willing to share their story for the next book, I'm willing to write it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and they can contact you through your website, right?
Yeah, they can contact me through my website. There's my emails on there as well, so they can email, or I can send you my email, and if they want to, you can share it with them as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your weekend to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This is really great, and I really, really hope people give our book a chance and pre-order the book. And we're really looking forward to hearing what people think about our book. Because it was a little project for us. Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell stories are great. They're just so, if you can sit down and read, they're all about 10 or 12 pages. So if you just want to sit down and read a little, one story at a time, and
yeah, the very
human aspects of it. Yeah.
Exactly. And you don't really necessarily need to be an immigrant to follow these journeys. I mean, a lot of the stories are just human stories. It's women dealing with motherhood, or a new marriage, and arranged marriage, love marriage, dating, all of that's great. But when you first get married to someone, if you've never lived with them, the struggles are the same. Whether you've known your husband for like 20 years before you got married, or whether you've known them for like 2 months before you got married,
Exactly.
I mean, I knew my husband for 5 years before we got married and lived together. And I mean, some of the women that talked in the book, I mean, the struggles were the same for us. We had to learn to be with this new person. And so a lot of the stories celebrate just us being human and the journeys that we go through in our daily lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Just with an accent.
Right. So thank you again. I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is great.
And maybe I say thank you too much, but can you really say thank you too much? I don't think so. So thank you once again to Chai for joining me for the podcast. Again, the book is America Deconstructed. It is 16 short stories chronicling the journeys, the stories, the adventures of immigrants to this country. She is working on another installment of it, whether it will be called America Deconstructed 2 or something else. If you are at all interested in this topic, if you want to learn more, or if you're interested in other cultures, this is a really great book. As I said, it's short stories, so it's one of those great books that you can pick up when you have a few minutes to read a story and then, go back to it. It's not something that is a 500-page novel that you have to really commit a lot of time to. This is great in terms of being able to jump in and out of different stories and reading them at different times. As I said, I found a lot of the stories really interesting. I went through a whole range of emotions, from sadness to laughter. I know laughter is not emotion. In emotion, you know what I mean. Sadness, a little bit of anger on different levels. There was just a lot in this book, and it's told with kind of straightforward matter-of-factness. You really get to learn different aspects of some different cultures and learn about some of the challenges that people face when they come to a new country. And even if they already speak the language, there's still communication issues. So if you are interested in this book, you can read it before it comes out. It comes out on February 12th. I believe I forgot to say that at the beginning of the interview, but this book does come out February 12th. It is available for pre-order, but if you want to read it before it comes out, you can enter our giveaway. We are giving away 3 copies of this book, and all you have to do to enter is go to Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and comment on the post, episode 132, interview with Chaithanya Sohan. A simple comment, U.S. only, please, which now that I say that sounds kind of bad, since this is a story of people who came from other countries, but for mailing and postage purposes, U.S. only. Again, all you have to do is go to Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and comment on this post, and you will automatically be entered to win a copy of America Deconstructed by Chaithanya Sohan and Shaima Adin. And that is it. It's very easy to enter. Thank you again to Chai for joining me. Thank you, as always, for joining me. You know that I love you as my listeners, and really hope that you enjoy the podcasts and would love to hear from you. So again, with social media, you can hit us up here at the Podcast Network and let us know if there are books or authors that you would like featured on the podcast. Go on social media at any rate to enter into the giveaway. And join me next time when I will be talking about something very different. I will be talking about dragons. Yep. So join me on Friday for that episode, and join me again next week for another interview. Hope you're having a great week and that your week continues to go well. Before I talk to you again, I hope that you have time to go out there and get yourself lost in a great book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.